То, что вы сейчас увидите, это запись последней встречи с Екатериной Юрьевной Гениевой в Лондоне, которая произошла за несколько недель до ее ухода. Долгое время я упрашивал Катю, она мой очень давний друг, упрашивал, чтобы она выступила у нас не как она обычно выступала на темы, связанные с культурой, с переводом, с той или иной культурной проблематикой, а рассказала бы о себе. Катя сама сформулировала тему этого выступления «Книги и люди, определившие мою жизнь». Это уникальное выступление, в котором она говорит о многих значимых фигурах, таких как отец Александр Мень, Андрей Дмитриевич Сахаров, Дмитрий Сергеевич Лихачев и некоторые другие. И вот сегодня мы уже можем сказать, что она сама встала в этот ряд хранителей культуры, носителей ее и тех, кто передает ее следующим поколениям. Катя была человеком редким, потому что то, что она делала, это всегда было творчество. Занималась ли она литературной критикой, занималась ли она выстраиванием и сохранением своей библиотеки, на базе которой она выстроила за долгие годы своего директорства более 1,5 десятков культурных центров, которые связывают и нашу культуру с другими культурами, с культурами других стран и народов. И в этом смысле она несла тяжелую и очень ответственную ношу, по сути дела, посла русской культуры в мире. Эту ее роль по достоинству оценили во многих странах, наградив ее высшими наградами. Много лет назад в стихотворении, посвященном памяти Анны Андреевны Ахматовой, Бродский сказал: «Страницу и огонь, зерно и жернова, секиры острие и усеченный волос, Бог сохраняет все, особенно слова прощения и любви, как собственный свой голос». А теперь слушайте голос Кати Гениевой.
I feel practically at home because I'm seeing so many faces that I know for so many years. That's why if somebody should define what happiness is, this is the moment of happiness. Thank you so much. Vachka, I'm not sure that I will be able to answer your question, but I'll do my best because actually what Misha today told in such a high style about me, first of all, I'm not sure that I'm, deserve all this. But to answer your question, I must say that one of the greatest influences on me from my childhood was my grandmother. And one of the books that are lying on the table in the next room is about my grandmother, Екатерина Васильевна Гениева. She was a fantastic woman, speaking and knowing 14 European languages. And at the age of 80, she decided to study Polish, which she did. She came from a very high-standing nobility family from St. Petersburg, and that is why French was spoken at home. And those of you who know how I speak Russian, even now I speak it, especially when I'm nervous, with a very funny French accent. Yeah, mispronouncing all difficult, Russian, and so on, because that's what I studied in my childhood. She spoke French to me. The other person spoke German to me, because that time, of course, I didn't understand who this person was. It was a lady whose last name I even can't remember. She was just Vera Skar. Now I understand that she was a vulgar German. And that is why if I wanted to talk to her, I had no other way but to speak German to her. And from the very beginning, my grandmother, she was a very religious person. She belonged to what we call catacomb church, the church which didn't accept the formal church in the years after the revolution. And I remember very well how, different men appeared in our house, very simply dressed. Then they changed and became just, priests. And the liturgy was served in one of our dining halls. For me, from the very beginning, there was no division about religions, because at the table at dinner, my grandmother said grace in Russian, "Отче наш," and this German lady in Latin or in German. That is why, for me, there was no divisions. She, of course, managed to teach me not only to know languages, but also this phenomenon of reading. What she was doing with me every morning, after breakfast, we were sitting with her at the sofa, and she was telling me in French or sometimes in Russian, very rarely in Russian, the story from the Bible. That's why when I entered Moscow University, I was completely sure that everybody knows the story of the Bible, and was completely shocked that I was the only one in the group that actually who knew what the whole story was about. The other enormous influence on me is the person whose very sad anniversary will be marking this year. This is Father Alexandr Mень. Because on the 9th of September this year, it will be already 25 years since he was murdered. It's even difficult to believe because, you know, for me it seems that it happened maybe a week ago, or maybe a couple of days ago, but not 25 years. I knew him from me being 4. He was the boy who came to live during holidays to our dacha, and he enormously irritated me because he was reading all the time or writing all the time. And for me, quite a get-there girl, I would like to, I believe that it would be much better for him to play with me, of course. And he was reading and writing all the time. Without him, I would have never become what I am now, custodian, librarian, just director of the library, because I'm working in the library for the period of time which I would say people don't live so long. I work for the Library for Literature for 40 years. It's an enormous period of time. Of course, I'm director since the times of change, since the times of perestroika, because for me, half Russian, half Jewish, Orthodox believer, not the member of the party, it was absolutely unthinkable to be director of such a huge ideological institution, how it was called in Soviet days. But when all these changes started, it was 1989, definitely, this Gorbachev era, when intelligentsia wanted to believe this leader. I understand this wave of changes, of course, would have affected me. And I really got the proposal from the Ministry of Culture to become the director of the library, which was a kind of shock to me. And I decided that I need some advice. I need some, not the second opinion, but maybe first opinion about it. And Father Alexandr Mень, he was in Moscow. He immediately understood that actually I wanted to discuss something with him. And I said, of course, I wouldn't accept this proposal. To which he stopped me and said, the words I've never, ever heard from him. He said, but Katya, I won't give you my blessing for this. He never used such words. I said, what? Blessing? What do you mean? He said, actually somebody should do it. I said, but why this somebody should be me? And he said, because somebody should do it. And then I tried once again. I said, but I'm actually a literary critic. I don't want to become the bureaucrat director of the library. And he said, looking at me with his fantastic sense of humor, he said, are you Leo Tolstoy? Which actually stopped all my, questions and discussions. I said, no, I'm not Leo Tolstoy, but it seems to me that I'm quite irrelevant and not a very badly educated literary critic. And then he said something which I'm afraid to lose most of all in my life. He said, time would be given to me. And it's a fantastic, deal. Because I know that it's a real deal with something. Because if you do something which does not correspond the upper financial departments of upper spheres, then this, time shrinks. And I feel it physically. He was to live when we were having this discussion for 2 months. Of course, we never knew that it would happen. This absolutely awful murder which happened 25 years ago on the 9th of September. Sometimes I see him in my dreams, very rarely. I know for sure that he is not here, that he is coming from some other place, because his lips are some other color and so on. And once I just wanted in one of my dreams to get the book that he should have finished. And I said, Father Alexander, you've promised to finish the book. He said, I'm finishing. I said, yes, you are finishing what I needed for the publication. And suddenly we went with him to some room in this, quite nightmarish flat in the dream, and he handed to me the Bible published in Brussels, actually to which he wrote, of course, all the commentaries and comments. And he said, here is the text. I said, but it's not finished. He said, go ahead and do something. And that's it. The other person who actually taught me to understand what libraries are was, of course, Dmitry Sергеевич Lihachев. I have an enormous, honor, pleasure, I don't know which words to use, to say that in a way I might call myself, somebody who was a kind of his pupil. The years when I was working with him were the years when he started thinking what libraries are in the world. And actually, I think that only now I come to understanding actually what he meant. We know quite well his, very, I would say, nice saying about the library, that the most important things in culture are libraries. Why? Why libraries? Why not museums? Why not, musical places, libraries? And the other thing that only now I come to some understanding is that if everything perishes in the world so to say, comes to the end, and if only one library will still alive, the world might have a chance to restore itself. I think that he was more than right. It's just we, meaning myself, didn't understand at that time what he meant. Because what is a library? The library is, of course, the collection of books. But if the books are not touched, if they're not read, if they're not discussed, they're dead. They're dead. Libraries is a kind of mirror to the world. Mirror to the world is a kind of, microcosm to macrocosm. And actually, for me, the library is alive if it's the place of dialogue, of meeting, of tolerance, compassion, mutual understanding, and numerous discussions. And that's what I've been building since working as a director since 1989. We're actually a funny structure, honestly, because nowhere in the world you'll find a library for foreign literature. You'll find just foreign collections inside national libraries like British Library and so on. But we are what? We're being created in 1921. That's why we are just the institution after the revolution. We were actually founded and created by a fantastic woman. That's why formally you see how we are called. We are called Rue de Minot, State Library for Foreign Literature. Rue de Minot is just the name of the founder. That's all, Margarita de Minot. She is called Misha, and the word custodian is the most appropriate word for her. She was the great librarian, how it's called in Germany, because she really was. She was an inventor. She was the person of enormous fantasy, of enormous, intuition. And what he did in 1921 still is very important for us. I knew her only at the end of her life because she was the director for more than 50 years of the library. And then the first lady of the state, the daughter of Kosygin, decided that she would like to take over. That's why she was just expelled from the library in 2 hours. She was the person who actually was sent by the Soviet government to Germany to bring, as a kind of compensation for the war losses in the country, numerous German books, which she did. And at that time it was, nobody doubted that it was possible, but she already herself understood that there were some legal things which were not so much relevant according to the international law. I remember when she was dying, she asked me to come, and while saying goodbye to her, actually farewell to her, she said, Katya, I want you to know that I brought myself to Russia, to the Soviet Union, the most precious edition of the Bible of Gutenberg. this 2-volume edition, the most precious one in the world. And after she passed away, I started actually this way how we can at least understand the provenance of German collections, Austrian collections, Polish collection. It's a fantastic story, very, emotionally loaded. It's not only legal things, it's also emotions. And the other person who I'd like to mention in this context, in the, phenomenon of these trophy books and so on, you might be surprised the name who I pronounce now. It was John Paul, the former Pope. Once I got the invitation to come for some formal dinner to Vatican. As you can imagine, I put it aside because I was absolutely sure that it was a mistake, because from my point of view, the person representing the high authority in Catholic Church had some other things to do, but not only seeing the director of the Library for Literature. But it was not a mistake. I was given visa in 2 hours. I came to Vatican. It was a very, I would say, unforgettable dinner. It was quite Polish dinner with cabbage, sausages, very Polish. And he was already like this. It was after already the attempt to murder him. And we were talking about different things. I can't remember what we actually were talking about, but at the end, curiosity killed the cat. I asked in a decent way, promising in a quite decent way, but the meaning was actually, why have you invited me? And I said, you have invited me because I have been the spiritual daughter of Father Alexander Mень. He said, yes, I pray to him as I pray to the saint. But not only because of that. And something whispered in the ear of the cardinal who was translating. He was translating me from English into Italian, from Italian into English. That's how we talked. And in a minute there appeared the book, published by the Library for Literature, the books, the German books of the 17th century in our collections. And I asked absolutely impossible question for any librarian. I said, where did you get it? Vatican Library is around the corner. I said, okay, but why are you interested? He said, I'm interested not only because I'm from Poland, but because what you're trying to do, your institution, you're trying to finish the war. Because while books are captives, they are prisoners of the war. The bullet, which is not a silver bullet, is still flying in the air and killing real people. And that was quite an important thing for me to go ahead with this extremely difficult thing. Sakharov, I had the pleasure of meeting him quite a number of times. But I'll tell you just one episode about which I've been thinking when Misha pronounced the word tolerance. Sakharov had a very unpleasant small dog very unpleasant. Yes, and this unpleasant dog wanted, especially when some new person appeared in the flat, just to do something with, your feet, your legs, your skirt, anything that this funny creature could reach. And of course, what I was doing, I was pushing this dog from me. What Sakharov was doing, he was giving space for this nasty dog actually to go ahead with all her, maneuvers. Tolerance, give space to some other. You see, Vachka, I believe that in a way, it's not my achievement, it's their achievement. That somehow they managed to put something into me, and actually what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to the extent I can to create and go ahead creating this very important institution. Times are always hard. We do not choose times. We live in them and actually die in these times. It's a difficult time for us now, and for my library. We have numerous investigations because either we're a foreign spy, or we're a foreign agent, or I don't know who we are. I know for sure that what we're trying to do, we're trying to preserve at least something which might be preserved in our crazy world. Culture, education, and if you ask me how I feel myself, I don't feel myself custodian. I would be like to call like my colleague director of Library of Congress is called just the librarian, instead of director, general, blah, 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 and so on. But if you ask me how I feel that in a way, I'm, a post-horse of some enlightenment, of not education, but enlightenment, and that's how I understand my mission. And thank you for all your help, because here in this hall are sitting so many people who have helped me to develop the library. There are quite a number of members of our International Board of Trustees. That is why I don't know whether I answered your question, but I tried my best. Thank you so much for this question, but I will start not maybe with the formal answer, but with the personal answer. Once I was going in the library, and at the level where we have the BBC library alive, I saw a young boy. I think he was 5, and he was standing eating an enormous apple, which actually is not allowed in the library, but that's okay. He was playing with the computer. This you remember, of course, this place. I think that he was doing it much better than I can do. And I was just afraid that he lost his way in this huge building. And how to ask him? I came to him and said, maybe you don't know where to go. He looked at me, and my feeling was that it was not me looking from him from like this. He was looking at me like this. He said, I work in this library for 10 years. I know everything, what is happening here. Full stop. And actually, I think that's actually the most important answer. Because why Lihachев believed that libraries are the most important things? Here, quoting somebody whom Ambassador Brandon, of course, knows so well, here comes everybody, without any restriction. It's not the university, because in the university there are restrictions. Here comes everybody, and sometimes we don't know who comes to us. Sometimes it might be somebody who is not a very nice person, but for us there is no other way but to say welcome until he becomes physically dangerous for his neighbor. I think that in the modern world, where with this, technology which we can't stop and we shouldn't stop, libraries are becoming places where we look at each other, where we see the expression of our faces, where we try to understand why we're different, why we should be really tolerant and full, using the word of Pushkin, full of compassion to each other. And that's an enormous task, especially in such a huge, unmanageable, unreachable very often country as Russia. Because if you travel from Moscow to Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, it's only 11 hours. It's like traveling from Moscow to United States. And you cover 11 time zones. And I mention all this because I think that with all our richness, because we're a very rich library, what we've developed, again, in answering your question, that we try to reach, the places, as I say, not within the circular road of Moscow, not only in Moscow and St. Petersburg, to go out. And since these years, we've developed a gigantic network in Russia. And we try to bring authors, translations, publications, discussions, children programs, and so on, to different places in Russia. Now we work with our books and book distribution with 49 regions, which is quite a number. But to give you a formal answer, which is a very important answer, especially in the age when lots of politicians, and our politicians as well, and I know here there is a problem as well, and everywhere in the world is a problem, because with this technology, what we're doing, we're pushing the reader, the traditional reader, actually off the library. Because if he's coming to us, he's coming not with his feet, but he's coming with his fingers. And what is important, to try to preserve for him, for her, for the reader, the place where, it is very important just maybe even not to come to read, but just to be. Because books, in whichever format they are, they actually, if they are alive, they breathe life into these people. And again, what I can say, quoting Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, at the very end, plague on both houses. And you know, now it's important, extremely important, because culture, if it is preserved, you will really understand why it is so important. Might sometimes do more than lots of, you know, negotiations and so on of politicians. Sometimes we are more powerful than people in politics. And that's what I believe Lihachев meant when he said, if everything perishes in the world, but the only library will still alive, there is a chance for the world to restore itself. And formal answer is we should become, and we are becoming, the platform for intercultural, interreligious, inter-nation, inter-between dialogue. That's what library should be. It's an enormous mission, but it could be actually, from my point of view, achieved.
Thank you very much.
It is a very complicated question. I'm not sure that I'm able to answer it at the level that you've asked. But I'll tell you what I think about it, what I feel about it, and what, as you've asked me, what really Father Alexandr Mень thought about it. I look at this process, hopefully in future, with some hope. Why it happened, we know. Because everything what happened around 1917, around and so on, that's actually the result of this separation and so on. But, you know, from my point of view, it's not even from my point of view, but I was brought up, as I said at the very beginning, in the tradition that actually our barriers that we create here, they do not reach heaven. And the most favorite sentence of Father Alexander about it was, we should be united in main, in only things. We should be tolerant to each other in things which actually separate us. And in everything else, we should be governed by love. That's why that's the answer. I don't know any other answer. Of course it does. And just to be honest, I'm not sure for how long the printed book, which I like so much, actually will survive. Of course, it's a capricious thing, because I know that, for example, in Holland, where technology is very high developed, nevertheless, people starting buying books as Christmas and Easter presents. Yeah. But you're absolutely right that this, you know, uprise of technology pushes the traditional reader or changes the traditional reader into something else. But we in our library have a very funny process. Людмила Skachkova, who is the director of our culture center, we with her have, you know, the problem, not how to invite young people to come to us, but how to ask them to go and have some sleep at their homes about 11 o'clock p.m. That's why we're needed. Actually, what is needed? It's not only that we invite them to read. Actually, you can't make a person read if he doesn't want to read. We invite him for these different types of dialogue, of, you know, meeting each other. And it works. And my experience, especially in Russia, where librarians are extremely innovative with poor funding, with salaries and blah, 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 and so on, they create this cultural, you know, cultural centers, but actually they create these cultural identities in their regions, which is extremely important. But I might easily predict that maybe in 10 years, all our books will become, you know, a kind of, you know, relics of the Roman Empire, easily. That's technology. By the way, you know, once I had a very interesting discussion with Lihachев, whom I mentioned. It was a time that when we were creating with Soros Foundation internet centers all over Russia, and Dmitry Sергеевич Lihachев was coming to these highly technological discussions about fiber optic, God knows what, and was sitting at the corner of the table definitely not understanding anything about all these fiber optics and so on. And once I came up to him and said, Dmitry Sergeevich, why are you wasting your time on all this technology? He said, Katya, I don't understand anything what they're talking about. But what I understand, that we're entering the new period of human thought, of human hypothesis and human feeling. And then he said, it's like in the film by Tarkovsky, Solaris, when this, technology, this ocean, starts telling us what we should do. It's a very hard, highly philosophical question, which I'm afraid we can't discuss it today, but this is actually what is around us. Technology is a very important thing. Technology sometimes is a very dangerous thing, because it's a gigantic pit where you put everything, good, bad, and so on. And of course it affects, as you asked at the beginning, the reader, the user, whoever is called in the library. I can't agree more with this. It's not just, it was not a technological idea, it was a philosophical idea of course, Joseph Brodsky. And in a way, what we're doing now in Russia, in my library, we call this program Big Read. How we're doing it? We're choosing some book and actually printed in so many copies that it will go to schools, to libraries of some region, and develop something around it, inviting, voluntarily for young people, for older people, for different people to participate in this process. It works. When we started this program, actually, it was the time when Dr. Billington, exactly when Joseph was actually developing this idea, was already the poet laureate at the Library of Congress. And it happened that I was visiting Library of Congress, and Dr. Billington said that, you should come and meet some fantastic person that's one of outstanding, he was, by the way, somebody who worked with Joseph as well, Dana Joer. And Dana Joer was the developer of this program, Big Read in the United States. And of course, I'm a Russian person, immediately asking, why are you not reading Russian books? As if there are not enough American books for them to read. And she said, we're not reading Russian books because nobody proposed it to us. If you propose something relevant, we'll do it. He said, but the book should answer some criteria. The book should not be War and Peace, meaning that it shouldn't be very big. The book should be by a very well-known author. I thought myself that actually all Russian classics should be very well-known in the world. And he said, please don't recommend Chekhov and Turgenev. I said, what Chekhov and Turgenev have done bad to you? He said, actually nothing, but the translations in which they exist now, they are so old-fashioned that young generation, they just don't understand it. But the idea, of course, that's a fantastic idea. Not only just to throw the books like this, but to have the targeted program for schools, for universities, actually for any place. And, I think it's very important, and it's important to find people who are able to talk about literature, not in the school-type way, so that the people will never read again, but just to find, some key to turn. That's why the answer is 500%. I'm absolutely sure that library, because of its structure in philosophy, really invites people of different cultures, religions, understandings, beliefs to come and discuss things. And they do come to the library because it's a very special territory. They wouldn't come to church. They wouldn't come to university, to some scientific places. It's a kind of place of ecumena, of meeting, of encounter, or ongoing encounter. But some words in Russian culture, which is also natural, they do not, they do not become the words of Russian culture. And the word tolerance is extremely difficult for Russian mentality, because it's not терпимость, it's something absolutely different. And honestly, I'm having very many problems when we've started doing it. We've published with Lyudmila Ulitskaya a set of wonderful books, the others about the others. And I had a really difficult problem with our legal structures, let us put it this way. because there is a book about the family. And in one of the books about family, there are 11 lines. So there are families where there are only fathers, and where there are families where there are only mothers. And it was published because, you see, the idea was that when the child from one of these families is just in public school, that this child wouldn't be beaten to death, which might have happened, unfortunately, easily. And I had quite a legal issue about it, because that was not, there was nothing dangerous. It was absolutely, as Misha said, transparent. But that was believed by some teachers in regions, by some authorities, that it was, you know, the insult to national mentality. And so you've touched also the question, very important, because just to bring this idea to the country with long-standing traditions and lots of Soviet traditions, and they're easily returned, that sometimes is quite a task. As the same, you know, happened, which I put in a very brief way, about the trophy collections. Because actually, even not talking what we return, how we return, it's important to understand that actually the world is united in everything that has happened. And I remember once when we were doing some German provenance about some German collections, one of my colleagues from Germany said, the problem, the issue, which could have made us enemies, actually are making us friends. But sometimes that's very, very difficult, and I don't want to say that it's easy. And of course now, unfortunately, when lots of these Soviet clichés are returning back, it's becoming really very difficult. I'm having now an enormous problem with some of our authorities about the American Center, which actually some of them wanted to be closed. And I said, I won't close it, because you see, if I close the American Center, I'll start closing the British Council and so on and so on. Because if it's just politics, tell me that it's politics. I won't invent any things, and I haven't closed it. What will happen next when we meet, I don't know. But just wish me some luck about it. By the way, when Ambassador, of course, remembers when we were having this problem with the British Council, there was, you know, it's always some human episode behind all this high politics. Lots of our teachers, to whom actually the idea of Brodsky was more than relevant, they wrote lots of letters to Duma, return to us our British Council. Because that was books, that was films, that was education. Yeah. Just maybe to give another funny example, the present Minister of Culture, Medinsky, who was very, at the beginning, I would say, you know, he was quite an opponent to the American Center, to British Council, and blah, blah, and he came to visit the library, and immediately he came with me to the American Center. And this American Center, there were standing very big, young military students. And he said, what are you doing here? I said, honestly, I don't know, Minister, what they're doing here. Maybe they've come to have some language lesson. And he's quite a tiny man. He tried to pass through them and could not. And when at last he managed to do it, he said, but still, Екатерина, what are they doing here? To which I said, Minister, don't you think it's quite a strange question that you're putting to me? Because as a Minister of Culture, maybe I should have guessed that maybe they've come to read. You see, what I would like to buy, or the library would like to buy. Me?
You. That matter to you in your life.
No, of course, actually, I think, Ambassador, this is the question, what I would have taken if I go to some island, something like this. Yeah, no. And not only because I'm answering your question, I will take sonnets by Shakespeare for sure, in original and in some excellent translation of somebody's who are sitting here, because there are new translations. Because, you know, for me, this gentleman who was called Shakespeare, whoever he was, I think that there is another story about the real personality, but it's another thing. But text by whom he was written, his text is here. Shakespeare, for sure. Pushkin, a small volume of Pushkin, first of all, poetry. And maybe if there's enough space in my suitcase, of course I will take some prose. I will take one of my favorite novels, The Power and the Glory by Graham Greene, for sure. Power and the Glory. I will take now, when I reread Lermontov, his religious poetry, because I think that he was a very unpleasant man from point to view, very unpleasant. Yeah, with lots of mysteries, with lots of unknown things about him. But he was a fantastic religious poet. That's already 4. I have one more. I think I should take the good edition of the Bible. That would be my choice. But if to think what we will buy for the library, it depends. It depends. I think that we should try and, try to answer these challenges of the world. And sometimes they do not correspond to my taste, but they correspond to the taste of our readers. But I prefer your first question, of course, what I would take on myself. Of course, translations of classic American and British literature, they're very popular. And there are, print runs, tirage are not very big, but nevertheless, there's enormous variety in the Russian literary market. It's very rich. There are lots of nonsense, but as always. Maybe I'll take one more. John Donne. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, for sure, number 6. Yes. And of course, lots of fantasies. Whatever we might think about it, of course, everything about Harry Potter is a hit in Russia. It's a hit in Russia, but it's a hit here as well. And it's quite an interesting question, whether it's good or bad. It's like it is. It's like it is. Yeah, but what is popular, there are some samples lying on the table in the next room. We do publish lots of bilinguals. And at first it was quite, enigmatic for me, why it was so important. Language teaching, and also important for this new school of translators. Because once we did, I think that was a mad idea, because I invited young translators to translate William Blake. And I know that some of my colleagues were just showing that the lady is completely gaga, because they told me, who would dare do it after Marshak, and who will dare do Tiger, Tiger in the Night? Nevertheless, it happened. And that's very important, because otherwise we'll lose the school of fantastic translators from English into Russian. And that's also one of the things that we're trying to do in my institution, because inside us there is this fantastic structure with governmental funding. And I always, pinch myself when I talk about it. I can't believe myself. They were supported by now more than 400 books for more than $2 million. This is if somebody would like to retranslate it, say, Отцы и дети, or I don't know what, or Anna Karenina, which happened, will pay for this translation if the translator knows which publishing house in the West will bring it out. That's why, it's both ways. It's a new translation, it's the publication in the West, and the promotion, it's the major image of Russia. Yeah, that's why it comes together.